We're continuing to follow the developments here in Washington in the so-called issue, the fiscal cliff. Very early Tuesday morning, the Senate approved the plan extending tax cuts for the middle class and delaying massive spending cuts. Now the House of Representatives is set to take up the measure next. They'll be doing that perhaps later this hour. Joining me now for more here in the studio is Christy Setzer. She's a Democratic strategist, and from the other side in Chicago, Republican strategist Brandon Brice. We got a lot of stuff to cover, so let's try and go through these rather quickly. And I'll start with you, Christy. Winners and losers politically. President Obama
is going to be seen as a winner by some, in that he is going to get a deal, it seems. But a loser by a number of Democrats, in that they believe that he could have gotten a better deal. Look, the fact is that he campaigned on ending tax cuts for those making over $250,000 a year. It was something that was widely supported by most Americans. It's something that he said he would not negotiate on, that this was not something that he would cave on, and now it seems as though he is. So
and he did. There's no doubt about that.
Yes.
Well, let me get Brandon's thought on this. Winner or loser?
Well, I think it's a winner for President Obama, but I think it's a loser for the American people. I think when you're talking about many of the Americans who are going to basically brunt the bunch of this bill, and looking at the losers in this are the small business owners, which when we look at, those are what's going to drive the economy and get our unemployment numbers back down. And so I say, you know, even though I think the Democratic Party in this instance won with this particular legislation and with this fiscal cliff opportunity, I think at the end of the day, the American people are going to be the losers in this. And I think, furthermore, I got to give kudos to those legislators and those congressmen that actually took the initiative to back down and actually stand against a bill that's basically something that the American people can't afford.
Well, let's move on to Vice President Biden, who came in at the last hour and was requested by McConnell.
Sure.
He comes away sort of looking like a winner, doesn't he?
He does, and that he was able to bring people together. I'll tell you who was the sure loser in all of this was the House Tea Party-controlled Congress. Look, these are people that are going to be seen as obstructionists either way. Now the fact is that the House is saying they will take up the Senate bill, but not after this, only after this day-long drama in which the question was whether they were going to amend a bill that passed the Senate 89-8, and yet was still seen as, until about half an hour ago, dead on arrival in the House. Everyone knows that that's because of the Tea Party. This drama continues. They don't look very good right now.
Well, Brandon, let's get your thoughts on this too. Biden coming in at the last minute, McConnell asking for him. Obviously, this doesn't look so great for Majority Leader Harry Reid, who was kind of shunned it off to the side, and the Tea Party also taking a hit this time around as well. Would you agree?
Well, I actually would agree, but I think the issue is that something had to be done. At the end of the day, going back, the American people are the ones suffering from this, and so I do give kudos to the Vice President for taking the initiative and for both parties coming to an agreement. I believe they came into agreement around 2 a.m. this morning, and so I think it's important that when we're talking about keeping the focus on who are the ones who are going to suffer from this bill and from this legislation, and it's the American people. And so even though finally Congress came together to come together on a bill that people have been waiting for months, I think at the end of the day, the question is not how did they finally come together? The question is, is the devil in the details pertaining to this fiscal cliff legislation, and is this actually a good deal for the American people? And I think it's not, unfortunately.
Well, you know, we were just scrolling through this document. It's 157 pages, and I want to touch on a couple of the things that were kind of shoved into this, and this is what's so great about Washington, D.C. Stuff just gets shoved into the legislation, no matter what.
Right.
And one of the things, the wind energy production tax credit, and the reason I bring this up is because Spain and England have cut their subsidies for wind energy. They also are looking at having to do some austerity measures. Wind energy was given this subsidy more than 20 years ago. We're just going to give you a little head start. And the reason why I bring it up is because GE had record profits in 2010, and they took a $3.2 billion tax benefit as a result of this. This is the kind of stuff that's in there. This is what people are screaming about, and it's still there.
Right. I mean, I think for sure there's some good parts of the bill and there's some bad parts. Look, I think, from the Democratic perspective, things that are to like about the bill are the fact that it preserves Social Security and Medicare. It has not made cuts to it. And it does do what the president says, in that it did stop the Bush tax cuts for the wealthiest 2%, those making over, I guess it seems like now, $450,000. But there are many other pieces of it that aren't so good. Look, it didn't deal with sequestration. It only kicked it down the road 2 months from now. It didn't deal with the debt ceiling limit. that's something that we're going to have to deal with. And as I said before, I believe it, weakens the president's hands for these fights in the future because he has been seen as, caving on the 250 number. So, what you're talking about in terms of, things that people are just already so furious about, this bill in part was supposed to, be a check and balance on, big corporations and the wealthy. Who've just gotten break after break after break. In some ways it did that, in some ways it hasn't.
Well, let me get Brandon's thoughts on this, because I know you're on the Republican side and they've been howling about spending. There's also stuff in there for asparagus producers, motorsports, entertainment, car racing. Everybody's getting a freebie, and this is what people are complaining about in terms of the spending.
Well, I think it goes back to, I think we do have a spending issue. I think one of the biggest things, as mentioned earlier, is that it didn't address our biggest issue, which is the debt ceiling, and which is our debt. And actually going even further, I think the biggest issue when we're talking about taxing those wealthy Americans, we forget that many of those wealthy Americans are business owners. And so if we're talking about really changing the economy, really decreasing our unemployment numbers nationally, it's crazy to say that when we're passing legislation that's going to increase taxation on those low-income American business owners, I think we have to really look at to say, is this really helping the American people? And also, everybody's got their hand in the pot, but the issue is, are we being fiscally responsible and good stewards of the American taxpayer dollars? Well, I think we're not, and I think it's unfortunate.
Well, Brandon, we're going to have to leave it there, and I'll tell you what, this is going to be Groundhog Day because we got sequestration just around the corner. We'll have you both back on for that, I'm sure. Thank you both for coming in today. Certainly
Thanks
appreciate
for having
it.
us.